Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. And well, my guest in studio, we've got Comrade Nelson Ekujimi. Comrade Nelson Ekujimi is a political analyst and an election observer. As always, Comrade, it's great to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning to have you.
Indeed, our pleasure. Later on, we will be joined by another guest from our Abuja studio. Okay. The EU report, the European Union Election Monitoring Report, has caused quite a stir because they've put out a report that is not favorable at all, as you know, to INEC's conduct of the election. And indeed, as far as they are concerned, they would say that there are issues with the election. And the other interesting thing is that one of the complainants at the Presidential Election Tribunal they've actually submitted the EU report as evidence, whatever evidence it is of, because it is not EU that is in the tribunal, but still they've submitted evidence. We'll see how all of that goes. They've taken it on temporarily, pending when the objections that were raised by President Tinubu's lawyers. They said that they'll come back and tell what the objection was to their presenting it. But in the meantime, in the interest of fairness, no doubt, the court has said, okay, temporarily put it in there. Now, so all of this is coming down to EU report and matters arising. We said on the program earlier, not today, earlier in the week, that we reminded that Dele Alaki, presidential spokesman, has said that, well, generally speaking, it seems like a poorly done desk-ridden job. Where were they? How many places did they visit? What is their sample for which they can now make statements such as they have made, questioning the integrity of Nigeria's elections? So I guess those kind of things we'll look at in as part of the matters arising. But this is a good opportunity to get your impression, because we haven't seen Nelson since the report was submitted. So what has been your perspective? Because you are an observer. You and a lot of Nigerian colleagues have been all around. Unfortunately, you Nigerian people didn't put your own reports out so that the ground would have been full by the time they bring in their own reports. No,
the 2023 general election was observed by about 230 observer groups, both locally and internationally.
Okay.
Locally, we have about 296, if I'm correct, and 33 international bodies. We had ECOWAS, we had EU, we had Commonwealth, we had international, we had embassies and what have you. One would have expected the party to the tribunal who submitted the EU report to have also tried to get the reports of the remaining about 229 observer groups that have covered this election. We have written our own reports.
Okay, but those ones were not saying what they wanted to hear. Apparently, it's only EU that is now saying what they want to hear.
Yes, I think that is so. So for me, we have seen the reports. On going through that report, one feels scandalized that some group of people can, fritter away the resources of the EU to come up with such a report. For the information of our viewers, that 2023 election was conducted in 176,606 polling units. So, as a research student, one of the critical tenets of research methodology is reliability and validity. If you are going to conduct a research on, say, a particular population, it is always expected for you to get an accurate, and reliable data, that your sample size must be representative of the general population you are researching into. So I want to implore people. I've heard that EU had maybe 51 or 110 to juxtapose 110 out of 176,000. That mathematics is just not there at all.
You don't even have to be a university statistics fellow to understand that
110
that
to
cannot be a
176.
useful sample.
And you see, the funniest thing for me was that report showed clearly that the manufacturers had a hidden agenda. It showed that they were totally ignorant of the provisions of Nigeria's Electoral Act. So if you have developmental partners like the EU Election Observation Mission coming up with such a report, people that are supposed to help you, to be your friend, to help you, in advancing whatever you are doing, whatever their shortcomings, then I don't think you need an enemy. It shows clearly. And that is why some of us, in looking at that report, we are going to make a strong-worded petition to the EU itself to interrogate the personnel who drafted that report.
But part of the other thing to consider, and here I am just speculating, let me emphasize speculating. The EU, even though it's not a human, has its ears and has been listening. A lot depends on who or what you're listening to. Has been listening to commentary coming out of Nigeria, because you've just made the point that, look, we have what,
176,606.
Yeah, and only what do they cover there? Yet they are forming judgment. Because if this had been a business survey, I wonder how useful such a survey will be.
It will be trashed.
Because this
it does not make sense.
Now they've put it on the ground, and that is their final report, as you recall. There are those who are celebrating it.
Absolutely.
Oh, there are those who are celebrating it.
It does life.
Some guys made a beeline for the tribunal.
Absolutely.
Say, hey, look, we have something. I said,
but like I told you,
what is it that you have?
We had 229 accredited election observer groups. So if you are celebrating one, or you are looking at one report, you need to go and look at 228 remaining. And even for the 176,606 polling units, observers were only able to deploy about 144,000 across the 200. So we couldn't cover all the polling units. We were interfacing with one another. And even the media also played a role in observing that election, because we got reportage from the media on the field.
That's right.
They spoke to observers, they spoke to the electorate, So when you look at this report, you ask yourself, did the EU sit down, the EU Observer Mission, EOM, did they sit down to look at our laws to be able to grasp how we conduct elections? That what has given them the confidence to come into our territory to interface with us, that they want to observe our election, is because they have seen that we are doing what is right. But for this body to just, for me, I believe the manufacturers of this report, I believe they just sat down in a cozy atmosphere, and they were just they were not on the field.
Look,
because I was on the field. I was the head of media and mobilization of one of the accredited observer groups, Voters Awareness Initiatives. We deployed about 150 observers onto the field. And what the EU report has come up with, even for our own 150 observers, we cannot state from our own point of view without juxtaposing it with other observer groups as well as media reportage to be able to have an appropriate assessment of the election. So for you to just deploy 110 and you are arriving at a conclusion on an election that was conducted in 176,606 polling units, it's absurd.
If it weren't this, if it were a field of study, I'm sure they themselves would be the first to say that this is the most inadequate sample with which to reach any kind of...
It is not even a sample. It's a joke. It's a joke, if you ask me.
And as you know, INEC, but not INEC alone, the presidency, the federal government, have categorically rejected this, what do they call it now? The final report. They say it's a final report. It's been categorically rejected, but they still put it, they put it out, and it is what it is. For whatever it is, for whatever it's worth, we'll see what effect they imagine it could have had on the process, and indeed, everybody will be waiting to see, because we're not talking about any European Union election here. We're talking about a Nigerian election. And I don't know, you might say I'm being emotional, but we have a problem with our cousins from across the ocean. We do have problems with them. As you know, in a totally different context, it must be admitted, they're messing with our sexuality. They have their own thoughts on how we should conduct ourselves, no matter our culture. They say this is the way it should be, and if it isn't like that, I think they've gone as far as saying that we will sanction aspects of you.
I think we must get one thing very clear. Whether elections is held in US or in Nigeria, according to democratic tenets, it is one person, one vote. Mm-hmm. And it is by universal suffrage. Mm-hmm. And that universal suffrage states that somebody above the age of 18 who has not been convicted, who has not been declared bankrupt, there are conditions. And whether it is conducted in Nigeria or anywhere in the world, the conditions for you to participate is global.
Yes.
But a situation whereby you are arriving at, it's just like this election we had. For anybody to say, oh, there were no infractions, that whole person will be economical, will be the truth. But for you to come and say the election was characterized, that is a wrong use of word.
That word
characterized is wrong. It means you have done a survey and you have arrived at the conclusion that majority of places, that infraction, what you would say, because those things happen, is that election also witnessed.
That's it.
That's the proper use of word.
And the opposite side of that statement is that the election was in substantial compliance.
That is what
it's not that nothing happened.
The beauty of the law is that the law recognizes that we are human beings. Does not say total compliance. It said substantial. And in this, okay, for example, you take the case of Lagos, when we had the gubernatorial election, and people were saying, oh, there were crises, and a lot of us came out and said, come on, we have 20 local governments in Lagos. Even in the 2 local governments that we have identified as where election violence occurred, how many polling units in those local governments? The number of election observers deployed by EU to cover these 2023 general elections in Nigeria is not even enough to cover a ward in my own local government.
Well, they're going to say to you that, look, nowadays there are scientific approaches to fact gathering and all of that kind of a thing.
Okay. Well, if there are scientific approaches to fact gathering in research, you must, explain your research findings. Yes. You must, give us the premise for us to be able, to understand. That's the way forward.
There must be a rationale for their conclusion.
For your conclusion, somebody must be able to look at it from the premise. Your conclusion must flow from and the premise must be verifiable. This was an election in which, like I said earlier on, the Commonwealth was here. They monitored the election. We saw the reports of the Commonwealth. We saw the reports of the African Union. We saw reports of the AU, of ECOWAS.
That's right.
We saw reports of so many other groups. So, for me, I don't think we should belabor ourselves with the EU report, because looking at the EU report on a scientific level, that report falls far, far below standard. That report is not even worth touching, because it's a joke, like I said earlier.
In fact, one of the sort of an NGO, MURIC. MURIC is an acronym for
Muslim
Rights Concern.
Yeah.
Muslim Rights Concern. They put out a statement. They went a bit further and said that it's very little more than a form of colonialism. They went. I said they stepped out a bit. Said, look, as far as we are concerned, because you see, to make those judgments, and all those eminent chaps, ladies were among them that we saw and that were behind this report, you begin to wonder, because you feel sure that these are knowledgeable people, otherwise they wouldn't be where they are. Absolutely. So one cannot cast any aspersions on them. But
the job they have done, they've done a shoddy job.
that was the conclusion of the Dele Alake presidential spokesman, on such matters as this. That was his conclusion as well. And that is why INEC was able, and INEC no doubt would have had those kind of things as part of its rationale in saying that it rejected in its totality all of this. Because let's talk here. Yes, there were issues. It wasn't perfect. You've stated it. And I even like what you said, that, look, to note that there were instances, to not say anything like that, but to now say the whole process was characterized by, then we say, well, we don't know. Here we go again is indeed the matter. As I said, we were also planning on having another guest, and I'm happy that Jake Ekpele, policy development and advocacy expert, is in our Abuja studio around 9. Good morning, Jake. Good morning. Yori Folani in Lagos studio here. Thank you very much for making time for us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're looking, Jake, at the EU report and matters arising. In studio, before you were able to join us technically, we've been talking about not quite. First of all, the report has been rejected categorically by the federal government, by INEC, and a lot of other people. There are people, no doubt, that are happy about it. As you recall, some people have rushed to the presidential election petition tribunal and have submitted it as evidence. But I wanted to ask, give me your impressions, Jake, when you saw this, that the report basically says that the entire Nigerian elections were categorized by all sorts of malpractices, and that it wasn't a true reflection. And they tried to put out there that the election was not won and rightly declared. What are your impressions, Jake, when you got wind of the report?
Well, I occupy a very strategic position, even in the context of this discussion, because the EU formed one of my projects in governance. So I want to make it clear that, number one, I don't speak for the EU. Two, my opinion here are simply my opinion and not the views of the European Union. With that said, I don't know why we are making too much, at the end of the day, literally promoting this report that we have issues with. Why can't we just look at it as a report? Yes, there are negatives. We look at the negatives. Are there positives? Are there things that we can learn from the report? Then we can learn from the report. Let me also say this, that from little research across board, very many people who are commenting on this report have not even read the report. This is a 92 pages document, 23 recommendations, 6 summarized recommendations. There are a lot of positives that is in this report. Let me also say what this report did not say, even though it's been painted to be so. This report did not in any way delegitimize the election of the president. I don't think the European Union in any way have anything against the president that is the Nigerian president today. How can we accuse them of saying that when the president of the European Union was one of the first to call the president, and their conversation is in the open space? As soon as the president was sworn in, they were the first to invite the president to come to Brussels and address the parliament. Not too many Nigerian presidents have had that privilege, and then they continue to interface with government. This is what I had expected to be done if we have any issue with the report. It would have been a diplomatic issue. Why didn't they invite the European Union ambassador and interact with her? I'm in discussion with her, And up till this moment, she has not been invited to table the issues around this report that needs to be discussed. But however, the European Union delegation here in Nigeria is not the same as the European Union Observation Monitoring Group. They're two different entities. I'm not speaking for them. But then if you also go through, because sometimes we need to look at and interrogate what we are discussing. If you go through the methodology that the observers mission use, it is rigorous, it is strategic. And so there are some quarters that will say, well, I don't like the report. And there are also some quarters that will say, I do like the report. But my own thing is, and this is the truth, every time you want to take a nation backward, every time you want to take an individual backward, take that person to his past. Once he's taken to the past, you lose your vision. And of course, you can't reckon with your future. Let's discuss the future of the electoral system, the future of technology, the future of the electoral laws, the future of the media, the role the media will play in the electoral system, the future of inclusion of women, youth, and persons with disability. There's so much to discuss. And I think the president is taking some positive steps, especially in trying to fix the economy and the issue of security. Let's not create unnecessary distraction. The report is a report. You take it or you leave it. What's the way forward? And for me, the way forward will be to interrogate the electoral system, take some of the things that they have said and move forward. Some of the things we are claiming, there's an outright condemnation of the election. That's not correct. Please, viewers and everyone listening to me, read the report for yourself. There is no outright condemnation of the election. There were some issues they pointed out with the election, and many of them were obvious. And it was obvious that they couldn't upload the election result as at when due. It was obvious that INEC didn't come out to give a timely intervention and communicate what was going on. So let's look at the positives as much as we are crying over the negative. Let's look at the positives. And I think also, to be fair, the words of the press release were too harsh. And if I were in their position, I wouldn't put out some aspect of it. Some aspect of it, yes.
Thank you very much, Jake, because it's very important what we've just heard from you, because it does serve to put some balance to the conversation, because people are looking at the report and the fact that the phraseology of the monitoring mission, that the election was characterized by so many unsavory aspects. You said that that was not the entirety of the report, and that a lot of people haven't read the report. But it has been rejected by INEC, which it is in INEC's best interest to have read the report. The federal government has also, rejected the report. And Jake, I think this is coming from, look, you have to be very careful. I'm not in any way going to get as base as to say that the EU was lying, but you know the expression, you tell enough lies, some of it will stick. And so you have people coming out now and saying, wait a minute, don't misquote what actually happened in the situation. But again, I'm ever so grateful that you have put it in the context that you have put it, that, look, people are hurt. These are interesting times, not to say desperate times. The election, it went the way it went. The percentage of the winner is what it is. So this leaves a lot of room for sensitivity, for people to be sensitive. But having said all of that, I thank you very much, Jake, for the sort of balance you bring to it. Now, in studio with me here is Nelson Ekunjimi as well. So, Nelson, a few quick words before we go on break. Jake's perspective.
I think
balance, do you think?
I want to disagree with Jake with regards to the fact that EU is not against the president. The report was not talking about the person of the presidency. The report was talking about the conduct of Nigeria's election. And as people were on the field, because some of us didn't stay inside our room, to observe the election, we were physically present. When we see reports that does not reflect reality, that tends to portray X as B, it is within our rights as active stakeholders to come out and say, wait a minute, I was there. We saw what happened. We got reports from other observers. And looking at this report, if you juxtapose it with even the petition case at the Presidential Petition Election Tribunal, you will see that two of the parties that are in court today, when the election ended, they jointly addressed a press conference that the election has been marred by malpractice, that the election should be cancelled. Even a former president of Nigeria also joined in the fray, calling for the cancellation of the election midway after the conclusion of the election. Only for these same parties again to now go their separate ways, and they were now claiming victory. So you want to ask, how can you say something is bad and you say it should be handed over to you?
Remember that Jake also pointed out that the European Union as a body is not quite the same as this election monitoring body.
No, it's the Election Observation Mission is a unit within the European Union.
And Jake also pointed out that the head of the union itself, was one of the first, if not the first, to reach out to
No, it's a different ball entirely. Okay. I think we need to get it. The EU is a body. The EU has a unit on elections, a unit on human rights, a unit on climate. They have different units. So what we are saying is that this unit of the EU, the report they have done, for which we are all members of the same global community, they've done a shoddy job.
Okay.
As intellectuals, we must query it.
We've got to go on a break.
Yeah.
But stay with us, please. We'll be right back. Jake, we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. And we're looking at matters arising following the final version of the EU report, the monitoring, is it mission?
Election Observation Mission.
Mission. And a lot of Nigerians, not all, but a lot of Nigerians are, enraged by it because they feel that EU was anything but balanced, anything but scientific in the way it arrived at its conclusion. And some people, as Nelson Ekunjimi, my guest in studio, has said, they use the word characterized, that the election was characterized by, problems, certain problems that would tend to tell on the integrity. But we're very fortunate that Jake Ekpele, who is also on the program, is a policy development and advocacy expert, has put perspective on this and said that, look, in fact, Jake's point of view is that the way we're going on this report, it's as if that is the only thing that was in it. And I was making the point before we went on the break, Jake, that, a lot of people think that you tell enough lies, the way some people are seeing it, not that we are saying that is it. You tell enough lies in a different context in life, then some of it will stick. And so that's why they've probably quickly jumped up and said, even that which you have said, nobody's going to go as far as calling you a liar because you guys are professional people and knowledgeable people. But, it just, when you look at the almost toxic environment we're living in, Nelson referred to a former president wading into matters. As you know, this former president had a different preference for who would win. And even after the election, he has still not been pacified. He has said that, you know what, actually, if somebody else had won, he thought that person would have been better for Nigeria. So, Jake, this is the environment in which we're operating. Surely you can see why some people are very thin-skinned about this whole thing.
You know, I like to also say that I'm a critical stakeholder, and I do have insight into the electoral process, and we provided everything we can to INEC in particular to ensure an inclusive election. I sent out 700 observers across the country. I invested, when I mean my organization invested in technology that cost us millions of naira to observe this election. Now, for the interest of your viewers, let me say, my friend in the studio has said, oh, the EOM, the election monitoring is part of the EU and all that. Yes, they are, but it's established to function strictly independently. For instance, when they came in here last year, you know, not necessarily in January. They came in last year and met with all the critical stakeholders. And by the way, they were invited by INEC. Okay. And so they met with all the critical stakeholders and set up the methodology by which they are going to monitor the election. They ran it by most critical stakeholders. I remember I had a meeting with them, and they interrogated the steps that they were going to take. And it's also not true to say that they only have or took the opinion from just about 50 observers. That's not correct. Because, for instance, my organization working in that space, we deployed over 700 observers. YAGA deployed over 4,000 observers. Other partners of the EU deployed several thousands of observers. Now, this is the way the EOM work. They can listen to all of us. They can take our reports. They can take our views. They have a system by which they interrogate that view to ensure that it will meet all the integrity tests. And then they make sure that it meets the scientific methodology that they are using to monitor the election. By the way, it's also important to place it on record here that there is a principle that guides election monitoring. It's a principle that Nigeria signed, the principle of declaration for election monitoring by the United Nations. Nigeria signed for it. So there's a known, agreed methodology by which they monitor election. Now, there is no perfect document anywhere. No perfect document anywhere. And I don't want us to distract the president. This is a report. Take it or leave it. You know, as much as I know, there may be issues with the way and manner they put the language across. What are the positives? What can we learn from this?
For future exercises.
Yeah, exactly, sir. Are there no other report that is almost in line with this report? There are. There are other countries' report. The US came out completely and said the whole election was flawed. Why didn't we make fuss out of it? You know, I know it is our right and the right of everybody to discuss issues and all that. I am not pessimistic as I am optimistic on the way forward. You know, this president has started on the right footing. Can we encourage him, you know, and leave events? Now, let me put it in perspective. You know, I always say that events are what happened around a person. Deal with the events, leave the person. My only concern is the coloration that, oh, this will make the president look illegitimate. Forget it. The man has the carrot and the knife. Allow him to lead the country. There are more problems we have to solve now than the problem of report. Let's solve the problem. My call is simply for the president to call for all the reports of the electoral reports, electoral system reports. Call for all of them. You have a strategic team. Let them sit down in a room, look at all those reports, not necessarily the electoral, I'm talking about the electoral system, like the Ways report. Sit down, look at those reports. Are there gaps, taking into consideration emerging issues in the electoral system? Are there gaps? Then look at how those gaps can be met. Probably put a smaller team to now look at that, call for people's opinion and views and papers so that they can thoroughly interrogate the electoral system, And we have a lot more issues in INEC that we need to deal with. Indeed. Issues like how reckless the recs can be. There was a disconnect between the recs and the INEC chairman. Yeah, my brother, I always said that the recs, not all of them, some of the recs actually raked this election. They are responsible. They are solely responsible for some of the things that happens. Okay. Now, the appointment of recs makes it practically impossible for the INEC chairman to discipline them. We need to look at that. The appointment of national commissioners, we need to look at that. We need to ask ourselves a simple question. Is INEC a big Iroko tree that we need to cut off the branches in order to trim it? I think so. Are there individuals in INEC? INEC has come out to say over 200 people, committed one electoral offenses. Who are these people? What happens to them? Let it not be the usual thing. At the end of the day, nothing happened. And that speaks to one of the 6 thematic recommendations in this report. Punitive measure.
Indeed.
Some of the individuals that created problem in the electoral process, even in the past election, are busy walking around as if nothing happened. Look at how the media were treated. Are we going to allow this to continue to happen? And there's a saying that it's only a madman that takes a bottle, throws it up, puts his head, and think it won't break his head. If we keep doing the same thing, trying to defend our own at the expense of the country, we will not make progress. This country is greater and bigger than any individual. And all of us must come together collectively to fix the problem. If we leave this president and get him distracted, he will finish and no progress would have been made. Okay. Let's come together collectively and help him to see how he will rule this country and get us out of the quagmire that we have found ourselves. This is the truth. I see the continuous agitation and unnecessary bickering as capital distraction.
Wise words, Jake. And I guess in a line, what you're saying is that, look, there's no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some positives in there, such as you've just been enumerating in the past few minutes, that we can interrogate, examine, and see what we can do with them for upcoming exercises. And you've made the point, Jake, I think at the very, very top, that look, you're not speaking for the EU or the EU EOM. You're not speaking for them. But all these people that your organization included, Yagi and all of them, were they working, as it were, for the EOM? Was that where they were submitting their reports to? And was this, no. I have someone in studio here who also, whose organization also observed. I wondered, because they had, very, very few, compared to the 176,000 odd centers, they had very few actual people on the actual boots on the ground. So how does that work? Were your reports yours, or were you furnishing them with the reports?
No. They didn't even bother to. My report is almost about 70-something pages. They didn't even bother to read them. Like I said, the way it works, One, we don't work for the EOM. In fact, during the election, even the EU ambassador was not allowed to be in their midst, not allowed to make any statement around the election. The EU ambassador, quote me, I said so. Secondly, all of us as partners of the delegation here in Nigeria, were not allowed to make any, we didn't influence any process, all right? They can look at our report, they can hear whatever we say, but they always make an independent opinion.
All right,
an
then.
Independent report.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that.
No, nothing like that.
Exactly.
No.
I just needed to clear that. So, Comrade Nelson Ekujimi, Voters Awareness Initiative
yeah.
was your...
Yeah, that was
yes. When you look at Jake's measured contribution through it, give me your overview.
Well, I think I must thank Jake, but I think Jake must get one thing very clear. The improvements we have seen in our electoral system since the birth of this democracy was not derived from any presidential seat. It was as a result of the stakeholders in the electoral process, including the electoral umpire. So I don't see how such a report of one organization out of 229 will be a distraction for the government. But, like you rightly said, tell a lie 1,000 times and it becomes the truth. Nigerians are intellectuals. And if the EU is conducted as an observer group, has monitored an election, we are talking about scientific, method. And one of the greatest tenets of science is openness, verifiability. So if you are saying something and you are hiding it under the table and it cannot be verified, then people have a reason to say, come on, whatever you are doing is not scientific. Scientific is that something you take to the laboratory, you tell us the procedure you have used to arrive at your conclusion. Whatever conclusion you arrive in point A, even if you take it to the moon, you arrive at the same conclusion. So whatever they have done, one gives them acknowledges their right. Yet we concede the right for them to do it. But what we are saying is that as Nigerians who monitor that election, who interface with other observer groups, who even monitored it via the media, that whatever conclusion they have arrived at with regards to the conduct of that election is at variance with the reality as well as the provisions of Nigeria's Electoral Act. Okay. What does the Electoral Act say? The Electoral Act says election will be conducted in a polling station, that when results are announced, that the results should be entered into a form EC8A, signed by the polling officer and countersigned by the party agents, including the security personnel there, and that they should all have a copy.
How about the uploading?
The uploading is the Electoral Act says transfer, I think transfer or transmit. The Electoral Act did not mention IREV. That IREV was an electronic gadget by INEC. That, okay, when we finish election at the polling station, the electoral officer will use the BVAS machine to capture the results and, transmit it to the IREV.
But that didn't go as well as INEC.
That didn't go as well as planned. But that does not... Our problem is when EUOM comes out to talk about transparency. I don't know what can be more transparent than a document signed by all parties.
A hard copy.
Hard copies. Everybody had it.
How about Jake's other point that it's a large document and people are, taking out... that was Jake's, sort of indication. People are taking out what suits them, but there's so much more in that document that the principle of throwing the baby out with the bathwater actually could be present here if we, because of our emotions, don't look at other aspects and see how we can adopt some of those things if we find that they are useful for future exercises. That was one of Jake's...
No, we are not throwing out this report. We are interrogating it. My organization. We came up with our own recommendations because one of the roles as observers...
Yeah, but we're making so much as again, that was Jake's initial point. We're making so much of this report and this particular aspect of it, the quote-unquote, what some people have considered annoying aspect of it. But there are other aspects that have not gotten the same airplay, and that is where Jake is cautioning that.
No, I think we need to be careful. What we are saying here is that if somebody has used a wrong premise to arrive at a conclusion, whether it is favorable or unfavorable, you should query it. Don't say because it suits you. Even when they have, come up with their own recommendations that we feel is helpful, we should ask, how did you arrive at this? Was it that you did copy and paste from somewhere, or you actually was on the field? Because one of the things we do in science is that all your materials will be verified. The materials with which you want to conduct your experiments must be verifiable. So what we are saying is that it's not about whether some of the recommendations are helpful. Even when the recommendations are helpful, we deserve the right to interrogate those recommendations. My own organization, part of our own recommendation is that, one, INEC has to look at the issue of logistics. Because we all agree that they still had logistic problem on the presidential election day, which they improved on in the governorship and State House of Assembly. We also talked about the fact that a lot of new voters some of them couldn't access their polling units because some were voting for the first time. Somebody just have a voter's card. I've been voting since 1999, and my polling unit still remains just opposite my house. But somebody who is a new voter will first of all say, where is my polling unit? On that election day, it was one of my recommendations. We saw observers whom we even tried, because INEC had this code, that if you have a voter's card, once you input your number, you input the number of your voter's card on that code, it will bring out the details of your polling station. On that election day, in the election morning, we tried it over 50 times. It didn't work.
There were technical glitches.
Yes.
So
these are facts of the situation.
I hear you. And, well, you did say, while Jake was away very briefly, but you did say that, no, you are not on this side of the conversation throwing out the report. In other words, the baby and the bathwater thing. No, that's not it, is what he has said.
Yes,
that's not what's going on here. Well, one is a bit relieved there because we still all want to be sort of rational about this whole matter. Jake, thank you very much. We've just about used up all our time. Any final words, parting shots on this subject? Oh, such a pity.
How do we fix that? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Yeah, okay. I said there's one thing that Nelson and I have agreed, and it's the fact that there were glitches.
Absolutely.
Technological glitches.
Yeah.
That in itself is a problem. How do we fix it?
That's right.
That is why we need to interrogate the system, call a spade, find solution. The more we try to make a fuss out of this report, the people who wrote the report have gone back to their country and they are fixing their own country.
Thank you very much, Jake.
Period.
Really appreciate you and your time this morning. Mr. Jake Ekpele, policy development and advocacy expert. Thank you very much. All right, then. And
Thank you,
in studio here, Comrade Nelson Ekujimi, political analyst, election observer. In fact, under the auspices of Voters Awareness Initiative, if anybody is looking for hard facts, because this one now we have to be careful about our facts because we're busy.
Voters Awareness Initiative.
There you go. Thank you very much, Nelson, for coming on as well.
It's a pleasure.
So that's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folare. Bye-bye for now.